Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is the third part of the video on secure software supply chain. Right. We have covered the four items in two parts of from the two parts in two videos, right? There will be this video here will cover on the item which is highlighted in yellow, which is supplier security requirement in acquisition process, and there will be another part of the video which is the fourth part that will cover on contractual requirements. Okay, let's have a look at this content. This is content related to security requirement from the vendor, from the supplier of the software. This is need to be identified, especially if the software are not being developed by the organization, but rather the organization actually buy the software from other vendors. Okay, so acquisition process when they are buying the software. Right, what will be covered in this content? We will see additional security requirement that need to be identified during software acquisition, and also other critical consideration related to software acquisition. Right. Alright, this content here is basically related to the organization that actually buy software from other vendors. Okay, so the organization that buy the software need to ensure that the software that they buy from the vendor is reliable, resilient, have the ability to recover, and it should the software that they buy should be a quality software. Right, rather than if the system are being developed in-house, maybe some of this item can be controlled by the organization, but as this software they bought it from the vendor, so there are some items that is beyond of their control. So what the organization need to do is that when they are buying or acquiring for the software, the organization that would like to buy the software need to request for assurance artifacts from the supplier. So meaning that you need to get some documentation from the supplier showing that they have done the software testing part. Okay, they have tested it, they have validated and verified against vulnerability, and how will this vendor will handle the incident management practices. Okay, meaning that if there are some error found in the software that you bought from them, how do they handle it? Okay, so the security evaluation of the vendor's practices. All right, so we need to actually investigate how do they actually do the evaluation on their part. All right, should include continuity planning. Okay, you need to have regular planning to check this, right? Including looking at their incident response plan. Okay, how does the vendor perform when there are some incidents? How do they respond? You want to know that. You want to have that information from the vendor. Okay, to ensure that the vendor actually what they do actually align with your organization business requirement. And on top of that, the organization that buy the software can not simply leave everything to the vendor. Okay, they have to do their own part, their own checking as well, whereby this organization must diligently assess and verify the security and the quality of the software that they bought. Okay, so once you pay does not mean that you rely or you leave everything to the supplier. You need to do the checking on your part too, right? Because the checking part that comes from the vendor and so on, needs a lot of information. Okay, so therefore one recommendation is to use a software which is called Security Information and Event Management, or the short name is SIM. But this SIM is actually having various names as well. Okay, so some product might give it slightly different name. Right, so basically what this software does is that it helps the organization and also and also the vendor to collect and analyze information from various sources to enhance overall security and operational efficiency, because the data are a lot, so they use this software to manage it properly, right? So in some product they call this system as SIM, Security Event Management. Some give other names, which is SIM, Security Information Manager. So it has slightly various name, and in this, if you go about browsing for similar product like this, and you come across with Security Event Management, so this kind of tools is focusing more on real-time monitoring. Okay, so they collect a lot of information, real-time information, and do the monitoring. And whereby if you come across with a similar product with the name of SIM, Security Information Management, so this is largely for long-term storage, all right? And then there are some analysis, but the analysis done on past event, okay, to look for patterns. So the organization that plans to have this software installed need to do some investigation to differentiate between what they want. Right? Do they want SEM or SIM? Okay, so there are many products out there for the organization to choose from. So what is the purpose of having SIM? Okay, I've mentioned just now that it's basically collecting information, analyzing information, and so on, right? Because you need to monitor this the quality of the product. Okay, you want to know how, if there is something wrong with the software, how does it handle it, and so on. So there is a lot of information. That's why SIM is here. So basically SIM tool or system here is basically used to gather information across the environment, because they need to collect a lots of information. It is capturing a various data log from the firewall, from intrusion detection system, right, from IT monitoring tools, from network devices, right, from endpoints, and from anti-malware solutions. So the data is various and from various sources, right? So the logs need to be presented in a more meaningful way. So maybe you can give a dashboard to help the system security practitioner in charge to provide interesting pattern. All right. So this SIM basically integrates various log data and then put it in a more meaningful way. Okay, so that is simplifying the analysis task. And then on top of this, because this SIM is capable of analyzing and gathering as well, so it is also able to put you can put weightage on certain action, so that you can calculate the probability when it happened and so on. All right, and then on top of that, SIM is also collecting lots of information, so it's basically providing secure storage. Okay, because this data log is important not only to the organization but also to the attacker. Say the attacker also are interested to see whether the activity that the attacker activity is actually being stored or not. Maybe they would like to erase it or hidden it somewhere, right? So I mentioned just now, it provides analysis of various output interested by the security practitioner. It provides reporting, and as well as it provides real-time monitoring, okay, because the data is there. If there are detect any information, it will alert it. Okay, And basically this is how it looks like. So this is the SIEM. So it gather information from various sources, from the router, from the file server, from the web server. And this is identity and access management. So this is the component that is actually handling creation of accounts, access control level, and so on. So all these are information are being extracted into the SIEM, and from there it will do analysis and so on. Right. Still talking about supply chain. So if you still remember, when we are talking about software supply chain, it's not only talking about during the development only, but also during the deployment, during the distribution, and during the maintenance and so on. So basically it's covering the entire processes from A to Z. Okay, so especially if you are buying software, acquiring software from the vendor, another thing that you need to consider is that you need to know how the vendor will do the maintenance for you. So you need to know how do they support you. Okay, so you would like to know how do they handle any updates. Okay, if there are some hardware that is having certain maintenance date and so on, so you need to know how do they actually handle that, right? So because you buy the software and you'll be using it for quite some time, so the vendor need to provide you support during the maintenance. Okay, so basically when you're talking about software maintenance, there are normally 4 activities. Okay, one is corrective. If they found any bugs, they need to fix it. So secondly, maybe they need to do modification on the features once the user feel comfortable using their system and they would like to have extended features. So that will be when this happens, we call it as adaptive. And then there are also categories that we call it as perfective. Okay, they want to ensure long-term functionality. Okay, and also another one is called preventive. So there are maybe activities related that you do during the maintenance to prevent for future bugs. Okay, so these are some of the activities that will be happening during software maintenance, and you would like to know how the vendor will do it, right? So because you have buy the software and they are supposed to give you the provide you with the maintenance. So what are they providing it to you? Alright, so if you buy the software, whether it's an open source or it's a commercial software models, there are some challenges and trade-off when it deals with maintenance and support. So normally when you buy the commercial software, basically it comes along with training support. It will update the components, okay, and other services that normally vendors will provide to you. But in another situation, let's say sometimes you buy a software which is an open source software, right? They also sometimes will offer you commercial support services while licensed under GPL. Okay, so this is licensed under open source software. So some of this open source software that is following GPL, they allow you to provide they allow the company that offer the open source software to provide some they allow the vendor to charge the customer whenever they are providing some related services. Okay, so okay, some software when they are in the open source, so some of them are following a license which is called GNU, General Public License, or the short name is GPL. So this is an open source, so it allows the kind of fees that the vendor is allowed to charge is, for example, is fees for setting up of the system, to do some management, support, maintenance, and related services is allowed if this open source is using GPL license. Okay, For example, companies offer commercial support services for GPL licensed software like Linux. Okay, they allows you to do some of these services to get some revenue, right? So among the core thing here, whenever you are buying a software, so the organization need to consider not only the software itself that they buy, so you would like to know how the vendor will provide you the support, so what's their plan. So we would like to know also how the maintenance activity will be done, okay, especially if you know, you get information from the vendor on how they would like to do it within the time given. And also you need to also think about the software that you buy, what is the licensing model that are being applied, whether it's an open source or commercial. Okay, let's have a look uh, related to license. Okay, when you buy a software, so you need to be aware of there are different types of license. There are commercial one and also there are an open source one. Right. Okay, let's have a look. Let's say when you hear software can be sold, okay, meaning that once they, well, let's say you as a designer you develop a software, later there's a company that approach you would like to buy your software, okay. Let's say for you, you would like to sell everything, give that the everything, you don't want to do anything with the software anymore, and then you sell it to the company. So right, when that happens, you transfer all control to that company. Okay. Let's say on the other hand, there is another way. Let's say you have developed a software, okay, and then there is a company that approach you, like is interested to use your software. Okay, another way to handle this is by use license to offer license. Okay, license basically transfer of permission. The source code, everything is owned by the developer, but the permission you allow them to use it. So when that happens, you say that it is being licensed. When you are licensing a system or an algorithm, for example, you basically does not change any intellectual property, meaning that that code, the idea belongs to you. Okay, they are licensing basically spell out the contract. Okay, what are the contract um, allowed during uh, the use of the system. There are several types of license exist, and you need to be aware of what does it cover, because if you do not understand it properly, maybe your company or you yourself will be subjected to penalties. Okay. Right, there are several license: commercial, shareware, freeware, Creative Commons. Okay, so the common one is called commercial software license. So basically, it consists of a master agreement, and user license. Okay, so basically, the master agreement, it addresses general terms, and then you user and user license agreement basically covered a more specific item. Okay, so there's another one which is having more variety. It is called, this is for open source license model. Okay, there are, if the software that you buy from a vendor is originally from an open source, there are basically three options that um, you need to be aware of. The first one is public domain, meaning that the software can be used and modified by anyone with no restriction. Okay, meaning that let's say you buy the software from a vendor, you can modify it at any time. Okay, whatever that you do, you can do it on the software that you buy. okay, which is originally from open source. The second type, even though it's an open source, there is some restriction on it, which is called permissive license. So there are some minimal requirement concerning modification and redistribution. There are some restriction. So among the common permissive license is Apache and BSD. That is among the license related to permissive licenses. And there's another one which is more restricted, which is called copyleft licenses, so or restrictive license. What it means that the software created or modified under this license must be distributed under the same license term. Okay, meaning that let's say the license allow for redistribution, either for free or free of charge, but cannot impose any constraint further that those already enforced by the GLP license, such as non-disclosure. So let's say you create a software and then you produce another version of the software originally from the open source, so you cannot change the license. You need to follow the original license set by the parent source code. Okay, so you cannot simply, let's say you found an open source software that you feel very related to you, you modify it a bit and then later give a different license which is not the same as the original license applied on the original source code, so that is not allowed. Okay, so you need to be aware of that. Right, I mentioned to you with license there are some additional consideration here. It says here software supply chain consideration are influenced by the type of the software license. Okay, whenever you are dealing with a supply chain, and another thing that you need to consider is the type of software license being applied, whether is it a commercial off the shelf, whether is it a government off the shelf kind of license, or whether it's an open source. Okay, so I mentioned just now, open source is basically publicly available source code. Okay, so basically I mentioned just now, there are two types. The first one, it is public, but there are another two variant of this license under OSS. One is permissive, so there are some minimal restriction on it, and the other one is copyleft. Yeah, I mentioned just now. It basically permits free use but require the source code and whatever derived from the source code remain publicly accessible. Okay, so potentially impacting organizations seeking to keep modification confidentially. So let's say a company is modifying the source code and produce a new product, so and that organization would like to keep some of the modification only to themselves, so that is not allowed. So they need to open up. So a company who like to do a process which is very customized to them should not be using open source. Okay, maybe they need to use other license, so that you need to be aware of. Okay, it says here organization modifying copyleft OSS code, okay, may inadvertently expose their derivative product to the public. Okay, because if the organization is not aware that the source code that they are modifying is using copyleft license, so initially they would like to create a software specifically for them, they are not allowed to do that because it's supposed to be shared to the public. Okay, so there are among the consideration that you need to be aware of. All right, I mentioned just now, like even though we buy from a software or a system from a company, right? We don't simply leave everything to the vendor. Okay, it says here you need to see the track record of the supplier or the vendor. Although an organization cannot know everything about the supplier, that the supplier or vendor that they buy the software from, they bought the software from, at least we need to know enough information to ensure the trustworthiness of the supplier. So at least we need to have some information from them to allow us to trust them. Okay, so so organizations should review the security track record of the potential vendor. Let's say they want to buy from a company, several companies, you need to see their track record. Okay. To evaluate third-party provider, let's say you buy from third-party or from vendor, organization may rely on several methods to do this evaluation. One is to use their proprietary, or they develop their own in-house checklist. All right. They develop security due diligence questionnaire. They develop their own. Maybe they have their own concern or their own worries for that organization, so they come up with their own. Or maybe you can use a standardized assessment tool and reports. All right. You suggest standardized information gathering questionnaire. Or maybe because you don't have the manpower to do the evaluation, you can actually hire third party auditor and perform and do the auditing for you, and report what do they found out from their assessment. So basically you can have either one or combination of all, right? So basically, so if you buy from software from an organization, basically you need to investigate the status of that company, especially looking at security point of view. You would like to know how far they have performed checking related to security. Okay, so as an organization buying software from other vendors, the organization is actually having the right to audit. Okay, audit basically is like inspection. Okay, and audit can help the organization to understand the capability and the policies of its supporting vendor. Okay, you're buying from that company, so you need to know what are their capabilities. So the right to audit is a key control that could be included in the vendor contract. So when you are signing contract with them, you need to put this in the contract. Okay, the right to audit clause in the contract does not mean that the organization must perform the audit, but the organization is reserved the right to do that. Okay, so right to audit is not solely on high risk relationship between, if the relationship is very high risk, of course it's better to do the audit, but not necessarily in that situation. Let's say if it's a low risk kind of relationship between the organization and the vendor, so you can also do the audit, because if you do not do it, maybe there is a possibility that from low risk it become high risk. Okay, because you do not do any of the checking. Right, so right to audit is something that you need to spell out in the vendor contract. And then another thing related to supply chain is, especially if you buy the services or the software from third party or from vendor, that is related to responsibility. Okay, right, we call it as responsibility model. Right, in the contractual obligation between acquisition and supplier, will determine responsibility for compliance and security as SBOM documentation. Remember, we have look at SBOM, so normally these are being spelled out in this documentation. So it's basically having a very detailed or explicit contract language that empower an organization to audit the supplier for security compliance. Okay, so you need to know, you need to spell out whose responsibility in for example, to do the audit on the supplier to ensure that the system are secure. Right, if you are using cloud services, the responsibilities are being shared. Okay, many cloud provider operates on shared responsibility model, which distribute security responses between the cloud provider and also the customer. So they are sharing some of this responsibility together. Um, okay, um, uh, if the security practitioner should carefully assess the selected cloud services, understanding the division of security responsibilities among vendor, inherited security, um, shared security, and also customer security consideration. So especially dealing with cloud services, so you need to be aware of in terms of whose responsibility some of the tasks fall onto. Is it on the vendor? Is it being shared, or is it the responsibility of the customer? All right. That's about it. Covered related to additional requirement related to supplier in supply chain. All right. Thank you.